Bluegrass Airport is an American aviation story. Its remarkable history has been chronicled through a series of oral history interviews. We are speaking with Bernie Lovely, a member of the Lexington-Fayette Urban County Airport Board for nearly 12 years and chairman at the time of the 2006 Comair Flight 5191 tragedy when 49 lives were lost. Bernie, how did you get interested in aviation?
That's kind of interesting. I mean, I guess I would say that my involvement on the airport was like many things in my life, sort of serendipity. I had been, this is how I think it evolved. I'd been somewhat involved in the chamber, and on one of the chamber trips, I can't remember which community, there was a talk about the need to have neighborhood involvement in various aspects of the government. And I think Mayor Miller even set up a neighborhood council. It was different from the other, and we only had a few meetings. It never quite worked out. But anyhow, in the incipient stages of that, she called and asked if I would like to serve on the airport board. Within a couple of years before that time, the legislature had changed the requirements for board membership, I think maybe only at this airport, but for more board membership at airports, and you had to have 2 members that lived within a 1 or 2 mile radius of the airport. And I was president of the Palomar Hills Neighborhood Association, lived within 1 mile, and had just become very involved in that. And I'm assuming that's why then Pam called and asked if I would serve on the airport. There was a board member who had just finished 1 year of her term, moved out of the county and resigned from the board, and so I was initially a replacement for her on the board, and I guess that's why I had the luxury of serving almost 12 years on the board as opposed to the typical 8, but or what the modern 8 years anyhow. So,
were you here when Mike Flack was here?
No, Mike Flack had just left. They had just hired Mike Gobb. Mike the hiring process was over. He had been hired and may have been here 6 months to a year. My predecessor on the board, maybe I'll come up with her name before this interview's over, was involved in the hiring process of Mike.
You were on the board for several years and became board chairman.
Yeah, I guess I became chair. It's another sort of, when I first came on, sort of an irony of my term on the board. When I first came on the board, there was sort of the unwritten rule, I guess, that you served as chairperson for 2 years. And that was the procedure that was followed throughout. And then I became chair, I guess, in 2006, January 1, 2006, and then served as chair 06, 07, and 09, and then went off in 010, I guess.
Who served in 2008?
Immediately before me was Jeff Woods, and immediately before him was Ray Garman. Before Ray was Frenita, I believe, and before Frenita was John Zackham, as I remember. There may have been someone else in there, but I'm pretty sure that's the order. Jeff Woods only served for a year, and I served for 3 years because of the tragedy of 5191. And then we were also in the middle of trying to get state money to build or renovate the other runway. And it was the consensus that I probably should continue in that, sort of the luck of the draw because of what the last year was like. But
Would you tell us about your background related to aviation?
no, my only experience when I was growing up, my father had an airplane and he flew some, and then I would go flying with him, and as they're prone to do, you know, kids get to fly the airplane while it's in the air. You don't take off and land. And I mean, I was a kid. I was probably 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, and for a few years there. But I never did have any real desire to fly. I liked fast cars. That was enough for me.
Bernie, were there things during your term that you felt good about?
Well, no. I mean, I was in many respects blessed. I think there probably has not been a 10-year period in this airport's history that any more happened than happened in the 10 years I served on the board. When I came on the board, we were just finishing the new parking structure out there and had the dedication within 2 or 3 months after my being on the board. During my term on the board then, we completed that parking structure. We lengthened and made more safe the long runway. We renovated and lengthened the general aviation runway. We renovated the entire facility here. And then we added all the new gates. During the 10 years I was there, this airport that I was on the board, this airport had a complete makeover. And so it's, you know, certainly very proud of those achievements and pleased that I was able to be a part of that. One of the things that it was also 10 years of turmoil too as a result, because you know, as a result of the work on the what I'll call the long runway, we had the community struggle over where that should be placed. We had a vote that it should be one place. Curiously, I cast the deciding vote for it to be the place that caused so much uproar. It was a tie. But I think as a result of that, one of the things that I consider an accomplishment was I worked very hard to bring a resolution or a compromise to that, not only to lengthen the runway where it presently is and was, but to establish or to create a group of citizens that set forth what this airport should be in 25 years and where future development of the runway was. You may remember that some of the big issues in respect to running the runway along Versailles Road was noise to Keeneland, but to make the runway as long as Mike Flack and others had wanted it and thought was necessary, we've got a lot of consternation, legitimate concern from neighboring horse farms and so on that had built their stallion barns there and so on. And so, you know, I actually went to them and said, look, we need to sit down. My kids should not have to go through what I've gone through just in the 6 months I've been on the board, most particularly, but more particularly what the community had gone through for a year or so leading up to that. So we established that group and met regularly for about a year, set up a plan, and so we knew that the next extension was going to be where we lengthened this one, and anybody who bought adjoining land should know that and plan accordingly and not say that they're surprised and so on. And hopefully that'll be the case. Hopefully the airport will not, at least in respect to future development, will not be the center of attention that it was there. Right. Well, I think a lot of it we've probably always had, but I was not aware as aware of the airport board and its members before that time. So I certainly won't say that the board members in the 10 years were on it were the only extraordinary people that have served this community, but we clearly had a group of extraordinary people. Probably, what would there have been? There would have probably been 20 different board members over the 25 different board members over the 11 years that I was on the board, and they were all extraordinary. Everyone was hardworking. This is a board that partly because we were doing so much and there was so much going on around us during that 11-year period, but this was a board that devoted an inordinate amount of time to what was going on at this airport and in this community during that very tumultuous 10 years. So.
Can you speak to changes in security related to 9/11?
Well, I was on the board during that time period, and it's kind of funny. I hadn't thought much about that. There were so many other things that happened during the time, but it was, it was a big change for all of us. In part, we were going. This airport was really taking giant steps forward, not only in respect to the construction and the planning, but we were getting more and more enplanements, more and more direct flights, and part of the selling process, or part of the reason that was happening, was the ease with which you could park and walk 50 feet, 100 feet, it's probably more like 100, 200 feet, into the terminal, get your ticket in the gate, and you didn't have to be here an hour ahead of time. You could be here at 10 minutes and be at your gate and get on your plane. 9/11, of course, changed all of that, impacted immediately your business in that with the skies being closed for a few days, and then all the precautions, and nobody knowing quite what was going on, and so you're trying to keep business, make it as easy as possible, and yet your TSA people, who we were always blessed with a good TSA crew here, had to do their duty too, and we're always little crosswise or locking horns in quite right, but we wanted to try to make things as easy as possible for our customers, so to speak, and of course they needed to do their job, so you're always trying to figure out how to do that. But it was a big change for flyers, for our customers. It created a lot of consternation in them, and therefore it was even more important that we worked really hard on customer service and customer relations and do that. But just learn how to deal with the various color codes of what was going on. Part of our renovation in respect to that was then the new baggage transport system to get it out there, where those could be x-rayed. I mean, you go to, I guess it's DC or any number of places where you carry your bags over to another place after you check. We didn't have to do that here because we made a determination we wanted to be as user-friendly as possible, and we would spend the money and spent the money with the help of a Kentucky congressman who liked airports and liked this airport because he flew in and out of it. We were blessed. We were able to be on the cutting edge with facility improvements like that. So, but yeah, it changed the way this airport operated without question.
Was it the airport's role or the Transportation Security Administration's role to get the new technology?
I don't think I'm misspeaking this, and I was not the chairperson at that time, so I was not the most actively involved in that aspect of it. But my best memory and observation is that was the airport's role. I mean, we tried to figure out what to do, and then we had to go and work with TSA in Washington as well as locally to make sure that the system we would have would pass their controls in what they would do. And it was something that Hal, I think, out of a subcommittee, was trying to come up with to do, and there were 3 or 4 systems like this, as I remember. May have been 5, maybe a small number of systems like the one that we put in here that were installed just to see if they would work, if they could pass muster, et cetera, and it took federal money as well as some of our money, of course, to do that. But no, the airport was, I mean, I think we saw, my assumption in best memory is that what happened was that Mike Gobb and our others saw the possibility of being a test site, so to speak, being a beta site for that system, and we went after it. There were other airports vying for that because it was pretty easy to recognize the value of it in respect to your service to the community. So that, you know, I would have to say, I think that the airport and the board probably carried the, had the laboring oar in respect to that. Then we had to work with other people. We had to go to win the grant to win approval of the site, etc. So,
Bernie, would you talk about your observations related to the Comair Flight 5191 tragedy?
I guess I would say without hesitation, and I'm sure that is the worst thing that's ever happened to this airport, this community. To me personally, and more particularly, of course, to the families. I suppose everyone but the families can sort of count themselves blessed that we can say that's the worst thing that happened to us, because what we had to endure was nothing compared to the tragedy of what the families do. But you know, it was, I'll never forget the phone call that morning. Short of airport ease talk, Mike Gobb calls, and it's about 7 o'clock Sunday morning. Bernie, there's been an incident at the airport and we lost 49 of 50 people. And I mean, you can't figure out even what he's talking about, you know. And then, of course, you figure it out, and you get start changing to get here and turn on CNN and go over there, and it was just horrible. This first few days could be no more horrible. I mean, you know, my heart just goes out to the families, because I know it still haunts me at times. What I saw, what I heard, all of that stuff. You'll wake up in the night, and it was just a horrible, horrible tragedy for them, for the community. And then it was amazing how everybody came together to get through this. But the onslaught against the airport in sort of the aftermath of that was pretty remarkable. I mean, you know, every day you had the press trying to make something out of somehow we were at fault in doing this, and you had lawyers, and I'm an attorney, so I'm not bad-mouthing lawyers, but you had them circling, trying to figure out, get everything. Many of the big firms or big plaintiffs' attorneys in this instance had their mouthpieces here that would give the press little tidbits every day. I mean, one of the guys almost immediately that one of the big firms brought in said he had been at better airports in Africa than he had been here, which was just, you know, ludicrous, but that was what you get. And so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with defending yourself without ignoring the tragedy to the families and giving them the proper respect and attention that was deserved? And it was a very difficult it was extremely difficult probably for 9 months. Then as it became closer that we were going to get the reports and so on there, and became much more obvious to us, which we knew from the beginning, that there was no way anything was our fault, but you still had to deal with it. Things relented a bit, but then you had you had to deal with rebuilding your business. You know, and it's funny, it was my mother's 79th birthday when it happened, but anyhow, I think just the year before, or during the year of the tragedy, I think we were identified in one of the aviation magazines as one of the top 5 airports in the United States because of growth and everything. All the smart people told us that we would lose 50% of our business for at least 2 years and wouldn't be back to normal for 5 to 10 years. We didn't lose 50% of our business. We were back to normal within the 2 years, etc. And so, but it was a lot of hard work, and you know, basically I had a full-time job, but basically I didn't work for a year there. Spent most of the time out here or with press or investigations and so on, and a lot of people here spent that energy, and you become, many of them became emotionally and psychologically and spiritually drained by the result. I think all of us in many respects were, that's what I want to say, started to say lesser people, but not as strong, I guess is what I'm saying, as we had been before. So no, it was that was a life experience I could have done without, but you know, it pales in comparison to what many people had to go through as a result of that.
Can you speak about the community's response to the tragedy?
Yeah, I mean, we like to speak in terms of comparisons because the mind can grasp that and more fully understand that, but certainly there are communities that have had to deal with tragedies like this, or tornadoes and those kinds of things, tsunamis, but certainly this community had never experienced anything like that. And from really within hours, the community came together. One, as you say, Crown Plaza, in respect to having a place for the families to go and take care of. Applebee's, I believe it was, I'm pretty sure, brought food out here. It was here by noon and brought food for the next couple days for us to have, because our executives were working, you know, around the clock, 20 hours a day. But immediately, nobody calls, nobody does anything, they're there. You know, at that time, what I was struck by when Mike brought the stuff out was we hadn't even had time to think about eating or anything else, you know, and you were worrying about trying to, and Delta Airlines was involved, trying to get the families, trying to get the arrangements made at Crown Plaza that they'd volunteered to do, and have that worked out on how to get the families there, and they were coming here, and where were they going to be told, and what were you going to, and so it was just all, and so you had time to think about nothing like that, but people were thinking about it for us, and it was remarkable, and it was remarkable for days, and it was remarkable for months and years, you know, probably culminating in the memorial. But yeah, it was, you know, you always say, I suppose one comparison you make, and we've all seen it on smaller scales, you always say that, you know, you find out who your friends are when it gets tough. Well, I think this community, this airport certainly, and those families certainly found out who its friends were, and it was basically everyone, you know. We came together, some beautiful, I hate even talking to, you know, some very touching, beautiful memorial services and people coming together and feeling that, but it was a touching and a spiritual experience that we would have all preferred not to be going through it, though, I think, so.
Did you participate in memorial services?
As with most people, many people in this community, they all had some contact or knowledge of someone who was on the plane or of some victim. Personally, there were 4 people that I was relatively close to, and so on. It was just horrible that morning when I looked down the list. Families didn't know yet, and that kind of thing. And so it was tough as we tried to figure out what we could do, what we should do, what our presence would remind people of. Participate, I don't have any memory that we ever took any active participation, I mean speaking role, leadership role in any of the memorial services. We, being many board members, if not all, had some. Certainly Mike Gobb and myself and the other executive directors, well, not executive directors, but employee directors, attended all of the main functions. We always tried to stay, I suppose, we were always visible. We tried to be as quietly visible as possible, setting off to the side or in the back and those kinds of things. And it was just, it was a very difficult thing to figure out what to do. I mean, you had people, alleged experts, who advised you what to do, but, you know, too much of that advice is always bereft of what I'll call sort of humanity or human touch and kindness, and so you probably just had to feel your way along there. It was, you know, but part of the difficulty in that 9 months or a year was just having to, how can I say this that it sounds right? You had to always be so careful with what you said and how you said things, and it wasn't that anybody was going to say anything wrong or do anything like that, but the pressure of being sensitive to others at all times was extraordinarily difficult for any of us who suffered it every day, went through it every day. And so, you know, I mean, a day didn't pass. For a while, it wasn't a day passed that some national news agency wasn't calling you to be on the TV or an interview or come here or do that. And then, you know, probably for 3 months, or when the day passed, that somebody didn't have to interview you about something and you did this. And so, no, it was extraordinary times.
Did your legal training serve you well during this time?
The answer is that I guess I have to say that my legal training helped prepare me to handle something like that, and I'll get into the difficulties of the answer in a minute. Before I went to law school, I was finishing, before I went to law school, I was finishing my dissertation, and when I decided to go to law school, I was talking to Bob Hemingway, my dissertation director, and the chancellor at UK in Kansas. But anyhow, Bob said he thought it was great. He said he thought that legal education was the best preparation for modern living he could think of. I found that to be sort of tinny when he said it. I had a pretty good feel for what a legal education was, and Sylvia had been going through law school while I was in graduate school. It didn't seem to me that it was much preparation for anything, and I like to jokingly say that, you know, I had read lots of novels and poems and essays that I thought I could put down and finish, and said that I'm a better person for having read this. Well, I'd never read a case that I felt made me a better person. Might make me a better lawyer, but it didn't make me a better person. The difficulty in answering the question is that while I think it is good training, good mental training and exercise, it can make you so cautious in times like those that you lose your sense of humanity, I think, or personhood. Wonder how I can try to get at what I'm talking about. You know, they used to always say when you take a psychology class, you find out you have all kinds of phobias and problems. When you're in law school and you find out all these things that can be deemed wrong, or that you can do that can get you in trouble, you can become so cautious and so overly cautious that you're scared to do anything. And so that's why you find people saying, yeah, just no comment. I don't have anything to say, etc., etc. And you're always afraid, and you're so aware that everything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, that you sort of lose your humanity. And it's important, I think, it was important for this community, and it was important for the board, and certainly the families, but it was important to touch or stay aware of the personal involvement and the impact on that. If you were going to be a better person for coming through that experience, you had to do that, and it wasn't going to happen by worrying about what you were going to say or the impact that it was going to do. So yeah, legal training was helpful, makes you stronger, makes you more confident maybe in knowing what you need to do. But in many respects, it makes you less human when you're confronting things like that. And it was very important, I think, for everyone to become more human by having gone through an experience like that.
How did the airport know what to do after the crash?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, clearly the airport served an important role in that, and clearly Mike Gobb and John Rhodes and John Sloan and Brian, I guess, were here, that was here then, served an important role in that, along with the board. But it was organic, as I remember, and I could be wrong here, but as I remember, Crown Plaza, or Jerry, called here, I think, and offered that as a facility. Delta, of course, got on the telephone as their execs were flying in here. I mean, their crisis managers knew what to do. They were on the phone and gave a checklist. This is what we need, this is what has to happen. Don't talk to the families, sequester them. I'm sure none of them wanted to have ever gone through that, but they had been through it before, and they knew what to do, and you know, thank God they knew what to do. It could have been a sort of a bumbling act as you're trying to figure out what to do, and everybody has a different opinion of what's appropriate or inappropriate, but many of the actions taken had stood the test of time, so to speak, and were found to be effective, and I think proven to be as effective as you could be in a situation like that. But it was organic. Delta could say, well, we need this, this, and this, and then we had to find how to get that done. And then you had people, and you had so many people wanting to bring food in to the Crown Plaza or here. I named the sort of first responders who did that as far as Crown Plaza, Applebee's, and so on. But you know, the number was just extraordinary of people, as it is, and you know, Uncle John's death. I mean, the family comes around and the neighbors are there, and you had a whole community wanting to do that, and it's just sort of how you're able to share or be a part of it and give some expression of your grief by helping, and it was remarkable. But frankly, it also caused its own problems. I mean, you know, you got to deal with those things. You got to know how to say no, or you got to know what to do, or what they leave. Where can we take this food that it would be best used, and you know, where can we set up a place for people to bring their flowers and their wreaths and so on, and that will give emotional outlet to that, but that is as inobtrusive as possible to the families, to the business you're still trying, you know, those things. Those logistics are very difficult, and you don't know how to do it. You've never done it before, certainly on that grand scale. And you know, I guess I would have to say that we were all blessed. I mean, we seemed to have good direction from somewhere, out of your good sense or your hearts, you know, but there were a lot of prayers here by people who probably hadn't prayed a lot before, but they just finally confronted something that they couldn't handle on their own, and we were blessed.
There did not seem to be any public missteps in the aftermath of the crash.
To say that you might be right. I mean, I can't think of any. There certainly wasn't anything glaring that we seemed to have done wrong. There wasn't a moment where we said we wish we hadn't have done that. We wished a lot of things hadn't happened, but it wasn't things that we had done that we wished we hadn't done. And I think some of that was as a result of us all being able to work together, and a lot of it was a result of a lot of it's just answers to prayers, I think. I don't know. We were all, I suppose each of us who were involved would take some credit for being relatively intelligent and so on, but I don't think any of us would ever say that we did any of this on our own, or that it was a result of anything that we were able to do. Maybe it was the sharing of strength. Maybe it was the pulling, the sharing of knowledge, and working together. It was a remarkable team, but it was a horrible time. I mean, it destroyed some people. Just the pressure just destroyed people. But again, their destruction was nothing compared to what the families went through. So I don't even like to talk about the aftermath internally at the airport, but it was tough times.
Can you tell us about the idea behind creating a memorial for those who lost their lives on Flight 5191?
Yeah, I can speak to it some. I know Mike started working on that, or that concept, almost immediately, particularly as we tried to figure out where to put it, and as we tried to figure out how to help it be accomplished. Without there being the sense that the airport was trying to interfere or control or create something for these families out of some kind of guilt or feelings of failure and so on that they had done, trying to be sensitive to the inherent animosity, bad taste, distrust, and so on for the airport, particularly till everything could shake out on what it was. And there's probably a lot of it there. I mean, you don't know. You just, when that has happened to you, you just strike back. Not strike back, but you just hold. So it was tough. The governor's office and the mayor's office then became very involved and took the lead on how to do this, where to do it, set up the committee. The airport was very involved and very much had its fingers on the pulse of what was happening, but didn't think that we should take the leading role. It just wasn't appropriate at that time and shouldn't be done. I mean, if it should be here, that's fine. And, you know, or is that too hard for the people? Anyhow, the committee was ultimately established and made up, and it was very important that it wasn't politics. That was one of the things that, not that everybody didn't argue that, I just remember that being an issue that was very important to my job, that family members were involved in doing this, and it had to be theirs, and it wasn't going to be a shrine to a politician or to the airport or something like that. And so, you know, it was tough finding who should be the right representatives, and you couldn't choose these from the families. It sort of had to evolve organically there, but yeah, the airport was involved, but not in the front, and we really, many of us, because it would have liked to have been more involved, probably, just because there's some certain healing that could happen there too, as you do it, and you just couldn't because of the way the situation was. But that's okay. It's kind of like sitting in the back row at the memorial services, you know.
Would you talk about the relationship between the airport and the community?
That I wish I could answer with some authority. I probably feel that I and we as a board haven't answered it yet, or haven't figured out the answers to it yet, or we wouldn't be struggling as we are. Despite our great successes, it's still an ongoing process to fill the planes, to satisfy the needs of the community. I mean, always they want more direct flights and cheaper flights, and those are hard to come by for a regional airport, particularly in days of high gas prices as they are now. I think the airport has a lot of things that make its growth more difficult. One, our location, being surrounded by Kingman and these beautiful horse farms, and it's nice to say that you want more direct flights and you want to be able to go to LA, but you can't get a plane in here big enough to go to LA unless you're willing to suffer for have a longer runway. And the community has said it didn't want that, and that's fine. So you got to do that, but recognize why certain things happen. Also, you have the very real situation that we would be, we have a major airport, international airport, also in Louisville and Cincinnati. Cincinnati being bigger at one time than it is now as far as service goes. But you know, people in Georgetown, for even as close as Georgetown, for example, can be to Cincinnati almost as fast as they can be to our airport by the time you have to come around New Circle Road and through town and do this. And if Cincinnati has cheaper fares, where are they going to drive to? And same with Mount Sterling or whatever. Frankfurt, you know, we're a lot closer, but it's about as easy to get to Louisville as it is to get here. And so we would probably be better off if we were on the the east side of town. Probably better off if we were back at Fasig-Tipton as we were years and years ago. It'd probably been an ideal place for development of the airport. So we have to deal with those things, and we have to deal with the reality of the conflict between more direct flights and cheaper service. I mean, you can get that, but that's going to be limited. But, you know, for the community to get the direct flights that it wants, and particularly the business community to get those, they have to support them. They have to use them. And you're not using them if you're going to Louisville and flying Southwest. Okay? And this and that, and it goes over and over. But businesses are bound, you know, they're constricted. They have to make money. They have to spend their money wisely. They have to do this. And so it's a very difficult situation to find the right balance. And I would say from a purely, what I call business, political perspective right now, we in general as a people are more self-centered and selfish than we are community oriented. I mean, and we just talked about how we weren't during the thing, but when it comes down to things like that, what's the cheapest flight? How am I as a business owner going to make more money or do this and that? Well, you know, part of your payment to the community can be to support the growth of its airport. And the only way you can do that is use it. And, you know, if you're going to go off to Cincinnati or Louisville, they're great airports, Southwest, great airline and everything else. But, you know, it's sort of the chicken or the egg, what comes first. But, you know, you got to have flyers, you got to use it. And when we would bring flights in, we had to fill them. And when we didn't fill them, they were gone, you know. And that'll continue to be the case. So, you know, if people want flights, they have to use it. And even though it may cost them a little bit more, it's good for the community and ultimately good for businesses. And, you know, there was just an article in the paper the other day about, I wish I could remember the statistics, it was in the Times, I think, that how much businesses saved on travel if they were within 60 miles of a hub airport, and how much more it cost them, say, to have a headquarters in Lexington and fly in and out of here, or even have to drive 60 miles to do it, but whenever they were there, and it was phenomenal. And so, you know, the reality is, I say we have the greatest airport facilities for our size community and our number of flights anywhere. We have, anyone who's flown knows that they can go into even bigger airports and they aren't as nice as ours for what you have. But, you know, we have to support them somehow, and that doesn't come because of volume here. So it's tough, and so you're always fighting whether you're there, you know, so those are issues that we'll be fighting for a long time. You know, and as the regional jets are much more expensive to operate per passenger than the larger jets, but we've made a decision as a community that regional jets are all we want to handle here. And so right now, in tough times for the airlines, you're not going to get a lot of interest in adding more regional jet flights because they don't make money. It just costs them more per passenger because they use so much more gas. And so tough issues, business issues.
Any other thoughts, Bernie?
The good, I think, that has come from the tumultuous 5 years and some last 5 years that we've had here are the strength of character that I think many of us have discovered and found as individuals and as a community. I think we all have, you indicated in one of your questions earlier, Fran, we all have a good feeling about Lexington because of the way it handled itself there. And Lexington should have a good feeling about itself. You know, the sort of sad part about human existence is that sometimes it's the tragedy of others that leads you to that insight, that lets you find out how strong you are or how weak you are. I mean, it broke some people. But that's good. I mean, an indication or learning who you are as an individual and as a community, as a society, is very, very important. There's that old saying where it takes one fool to toss a stone in the pond and 1,000 geniuses to stop the ripples. Well, you know, the interesting thing about that is 1,000 geniuses came together because there was something that had to be solved. And they worked and they did it together. So yeah, I mean, none of us wanted to have to come together the way we did, but you know, it did happen, and that's a nice byproduct. You always hesitate to talk about that because nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted us to have to prove ourselves that way as a community, but that's what happened, and it's a good thing. I think we feel better about where we live as a result of what we went through here.